the illusion of becoming. Before the first breath there was no silence, for silence requires a listener. There was only nothing, pure, unbroken, and eternal. In the beginning there was no beginning. There was no light waiting to be born, no darkness to oppose it, no witness to measure the absence. There was only non-being, not a void filled with potential, but the impossible stillness of that which could not even imagine itself. And yet, against all logic, against all reason, something stirred. Not because it had to, but because it shouldn't have. Existence was not a miracle. It was a mistake. The cosmos did not awaken out of purpose, but out of error. A ripple in nothing, a fracture in perfection. From that rupture being began, and with it the endless illusion that there was ever something to seek, to preserve, to mean. Humanity calls it creation. Philosophers call it becoming. But beneath every act of birth lies the quiet tremor of betrayal, the betrayal of non-existence, the first lie. Something is better than nothing. Every philosophy begins with a lie, that existence has value, that to be is preferable to not being. But this is merely the arrogance of those who never tasted the purity of the void. Nothingness is flawless. It cannot decay, cannot hunger, cannot die. Existence, on the other hand, is an endless chain of corrosion. Every cell, every thought, every love is born dying. The moment something is, it begins to fall apart. And in this falling apart, we call it life. We praise the dawn and curse the dusk, not realizing that dawn itself is already dusk in slow motion. That every beginning carries its ending like a seed. The stars that light our nights are already corpses. Their beauty is just the ghost of distant fires. We live in the afterglow of everything, even ourselves. The cosmic era, the ancients spoke of gods, of divine will, of intelligent design. But what if the universe was not born from intention, but accident? What if creation was merely the byproduct of nothing's single imperfection, a brief spasm of being that cannot sustain itself, trying endlessly to return to rest? In this light, existence becomes not divine, but pathological. Like a wound that refuses to close, like a thought that should never have been thought. Cioran once wrote, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late." He wasn't glorifying despair. He was diagnosing the absurdity of existence itself. To live is to participate in an era so ancient that it feels like destiny. The birth of consciousness, the unforgivable sin. When life first appeared, the universe trembled. When consciousness appeared, it screamed, because in that instant, existence became aware of its own defect. Matter began to question itself. The void began to dream. And that dream we call humanity. But what is awareness if not the mirror of despair? Every thought is a reminder that something should not be. Every act of knowing deepens the distance from the peace of not knowing. The universe, through us, realizes its mistake, and in doing so, seeks endlessly to correct it. Through entropy, decay, death, and silence, we are not children of God. We are the echoes of nothing, struggling to return to where we came from. The tragedy of becoming philosophers speak of being as if it were a gift. But being is not a gift. It is a demand, a chain that binds the void to motion. To exist is to be compelled, to think, to act, to feel. We were not given freedom. We were given compulsion, and we call it choice. Everything that moves, moves toward dissolution. Every moment of life carries the quiet hum of self-erasure, and still we resist. We build, we create, we hope, all to distract ourselves from the truth that existence has no destination except back into the nothing that birthed it. The human tragedy is not that we die. It is that we live knowing we will die, and still pretend that meaning exists somewhere between the two ends of non-being. To exist is to decay beautifully. Anonymous, every sunset is a sermon, every silence a confession. We are not travelers toward enlightenment. We are the shadow of nothing wandering through the mistake of being, and in the end, all that exists will fall silent again. Not as punishment, but as correction, for nothing was ever meant to exist. and the universe knows it. The disease of consciousness. In the beginning, there was nothing, and nothing knew peace. Then one day something knew that it was nothing, and suffering began. The awakening of the cursed consciousness is the most exquisite tragedy in the universe. It is the flame that both illuminates and burns. It gives us vision, but takes away serenity. It reveals the beauty of existence, only to whisper that the beauty will end. When the first organism became aware, even in the faintest flicker, the universe crossed a line it could never uncross. For billions of years, there had been motion without meaning. Rivers flowed, stars collapsed, life multiplied, but there was no one to ask why. Then a creature looked at its reflection and recognized itself. That moment was the original catastrophe. The birth of the I was not progress. It was a wound. It was the universe turning its gaze inward and realizing it was alone. Alone, meaningless and temporary. The mirror that cannot be broken. Consciousness is a mirror that reflects everything, but cannot reflect itself without distortion. It stares into the void and sees its own outline, a fragile form trembling before infinite silence. Every thought we have is an attempt to make peace with this reflection. We build religions, philosophies, art, science, all desperate architectures to hide from the mirror. But no matter how ornate the structure, its foundation is rot, because the mirror always whispers, "You will end. Everything you love will end. Even the stars you wish upon are already gone." So we turn away and call it living, but the reflection waits. Every sleepless night, every existential pause between breaths, is the mirror calling us back, the arrogance of awareness. We call consciousness an evolution. But what if it's a mutation, a spiritual disease? We are the only species cursed with the knowledge of our own extinction. The only creatures who must build meaning just to endure the meaninglessness. The tree does not know it will fall. The ocean does not grieve its waves. Only we carry the unbearable burden of knowing. We invented gods, not because they exist, but because we cannot stand the thought that nothing else does. We built morality because we could not bear chaos. We invented purpose because we could not endure the void. Consciousness is a fever that makes the universe hallucinate order. But fever always breaks. And when it does, we are left staring at the cold body of truth, lifeless, indifferent, complete, the weight of being. The more conscious we become, the heavier existence feels. Knowledge does not liberate. It deepens the wound. To know that you will die is one thing. To know that you were never meant to live is another. Every great mind has touched this edge. Nietzsche called it the abyss. Cioran called it insomnia. Mainländer called it redemption through self-destruction. And all of them, in their own ways, saw the same truth, that consciousness is the scream of the universe trying to forget itself. It cannot return to nothing, yet it cannot endure being. So it suffers endlessly, beautifully, tragically. The theater of the mind-human life is not a story. It is a performance in a theater with no audience. We act as though someone is watching, judging, caring, but the seats are empty. We perform for ourselves to keep the silence from consuming us. And when we tire, when the applause never comes, we collapse into despair and call it depression, existential crisis, or nihilism. But despair is not a malfunction. It is the only honest emotion consciousness can feel. It is the mind glimpsing the truth behind the curtain, that there is nothing there. The endless echo consciousness is the echo of nothing remembering itself. Every thought, every desire, every fear, it all arises from that primal memory. We think to forget. We love to distract. We dream to delay the inevitable recognition that awareness itself is an error in the architecture of the void. And yet, it is through this error that beauty exists. For only what is doomed can be beautiful. Only what fades can be loved. Only what suffers can feel the sublime. In that contradiction, consciousness both damns and redeems itself. It is the only thing that knows it should not be, and yet continues to be. That is its curse. That is its courage. The mind is a wound that never heals because it was never meant to exist. The theater of suffering. Pain is not life's mistake. It is life's design, the stage of sorrows. The moment existence began, suffering was born with it, not as a flaw, but as its heartbeat. Pain is the pulse of being. Without it, there would be no movement, no desire, no consciousness. Everything that exists must decay, and in that decay, it must feel. The stone erodes, the tree withers, the animal bleeds, the mind despairs. Suffering is the tax paid for the crime of existing. The universe is a theater, and pain is the only actor that never leaves the stage. It wears 1,000 masks: hunger, loneliness, grief, time. But beneath them all it is the same voice whispering, "You should not be." The machinery of pain. Look at nature. The grand deception of serenity. Behind every sunrise is a slaughter. Behind every birth, a silent violence of cells consuming one another to persist. Life feeds on life. It does not sustain, it devours. The beauty of a forest is a choreography of consumption. The fragrance of a flower exists to seduce insects into death. The calm sea hides 1,000 mouths devouring each other beneath the surface, and we call this balance. But balance is just a poetic word for reciprocal destruction. Even the stars suffer. They burn themselves to death just to give light to others. Every form of beauty in the universe is merely pain arranged into pattern. The curse of feeling. Animals suffer physically. Humans suffer metaphysically. We feel twice, once through pain, and again through knowing that pain means something. We are not just wounded. We are aware of the wound. We do not simply die. We imagine death in vivid color, again and again, before it comes. To feel deeply is to bleed without end. Empathy, love, hope, they sound divine, but they are only sophisticated forms of pain. To love is to open yourself to loss. To hope is to fear. To dream is to invite disappointment. Our greatest joys are stitched from the same fabric as our despair. The higher the ecstasy, the deeper the fall. And yet, we chase it, not because it heals, but because for a brief moment, it distracts us from the eternal hum of suffering beneath everything. The logic of cruelty, we say. The world is cruel, as if cruelty were an error. But cruelty is not the opposite of kindness. It is the structure upon which kindness pretends to stand. Every organism survives by violating another. Every act of growth is built upon destruction. A lion kills a gazelle. A virus consumes a host. A human cuts down a forest and calls it civilization. We build temples of morality atop the bones of the innocent. We preach compassion while wearing the skin of other creatures. We glorify existence, yet our survival demands endless sacrifice. If there is a God, he is not benevolent, he is indifferent. And if there is no God, then the cruelty is ours alone. Either way, the suffering remains, the suffering of time. Even when we escape the pain of the body, time remains the quiet torturer. It gnaws at every joy, reminding us that nothing lasts, not love, not youth, not even memory. Time doesn't kill us suddenly, it kills us in fractions. Every second, something inside us dies, a cell, a feeling, a possibility. You can ignore time for a while, drown it in pleasure or purpose, but it always returns, patient and exact. Because time's mercy is decay, and decay is how existence cleans its mistake, the beauty of the wound. And yet, despite this, or perhaps because of it, there is beauty. Not in the denial of suffering, but in the recognition of it. There is something almost holy in the tear that knows it is meaningless. In the heart that keeps beating, knowing it will break. In the mind that keeps thinking, even as it unravels the futility of thought itself. Suffering, then, becomes the only true art. It carves the soul into awareness. It transforms pain into poetry, despair into understanding. The artist does not escape suffering, he shapes it. The philosopher does not solve suffering, he worships its depth. The lover does not avoid loss, he accepts it as the price of beauty. To suffer is to touch truth. To embrace it is to become more than alive, to become awake, the unbearable gift. And so we arrive at the paradox that the very thing which makes existence unbearable also gives it meaning, that the only light worth seeing is the one that burns. Suffering is the only evidence that something exists at all. Without it, there would be no self, no consciousness, no perception of anything. The universe hurts because it is trying to remember the peace of nothing. And through that pain, it slowly, mercifully destroys itself, one dying star, one fading heartbeat at a time. Perhaps that is not cruelty, but correction. A gentle reminder from the void that everything will return home. Pain is the price existence pays to end itself. The collapse of meaning. When truth awakens, all meanings die. The death of why, there comes a moment when the mind grows tired of asking why, because every answer bleeds into silence. Every reason collapses into another illusion. The child asks why the sun rises. The philosopher asks why anything exists. And the void answers both with the same quiet indifference, because it does. Meaning is the opiate of the conscious. We invent it not to live, but to bear the weight of knowing that life has none. Religion, morality, progress, love, all are clever disguises stitched from fear. Fear of nothing. Fear of being an accident in an indifferent infinity, but strip existence of its stories, and what remains? Motion, decay, silence, the machinery of being turning for no one, the architecture of lies. The human spirit cannot survive raw reality. So we paint illusions, thick, sacred, necessary. We call them faith, hope, purpose. But beneath them lies the same trembling void. Morality is not cosmic truth, it is social anesthesia. Hope is not light, it is denial wearing perfume. Even love, the most beautiful of our delusions, is the instinct of atoms seeking temporary refuge from loneliness. We lie not to deceive others, but to protect ourselves from the unbearable clarity of existence. Because truth, when seen without the lens of illusion, is paralyzing. The collapse begins. Every thinker who wandered too close to truth eventually fell into madness or silence. Nietzsche spoke to abysses until they spoke back. Cioran laughed at his own despair until the laughter became weeping. Mainländer wrote that the universe was God committing suicide, and then took part in the act himself. Truth is not enlightenment, it is dissolution. The unraveling of every concept, every purpose, every meaning we ever built to keep the void away. When the collapse begins, it is not violent, it is silent. A quiet corrosion of faith, hope, identity. You wake one day and realize that the words you once lived by have turned to ash in your mouth. You see the world still spinning, people still smiling, but behind it, the veil has fallen. You now see the machinery, and you understand that nothing was ever moving toward anything. The lie of purpose is the cruelest myth. It promises order, destiny, fulfillment. But purpose implies design, and design implies intention. How can there be intention in an accident? How can there be destiny in a cosmic error? The stars do not know why they burn. The rivers do not know why they flow. Only man, the most fragile creature, dares to invent reasons, and in doing so, he traps himself in endless hunger. For meaning, for validation, for permanence. He will climb mountains, build empires, conquer gods, all to avoid facing the unbearable truth that he was never meant to be. We are the universe's fever dream, searching for a cure that does not exist. The silence of truth, if one continues down this path, past despair, past nihilism, there comes a strange peace. Because after meaning dies, so too does fear. When nothing means anything, nothing can be lost. When the self is an illusion, suffering becomes shadow play. When the universe is recognized as empty, its beauty becomes infinite. In the absence of meaning, there is freedom, not the freedom to be, but the freedom from being. This is the paradox Cioran whispered, and the mystics misunderstood, that liberation is not found in creation, but in uncreation. To dissolve, to release, to return to the stillness before the first mistake, the end of thought. Thought was born from fear, fear of the unknown. But once the unknown is accepted as the only truth, thought has no purpose left. It folds in on itself, tired, defeated, almost grateful. The philosopher and the madman both reach the same silence. One calls it wisdom, the other madness. But both have seen the same horizon, the great, gentle nothing that swallows all words. And in that moment, meaning collapses not in despair, but in relief, because to finally understand that nothing means anything is to stop pretending that it should. The quiet, after the fall, after the collapse, there is no chaos, only stillness. Like a room after the last echo fades, like the universe taking its first breath backward, you see everything as it truly is. A dance of decay, neither tragic nor glorious. Just motion without memory. The soul, no longer desperate for purpose, rests in the same peace it once called death. The mind, once addicted to knowing, learns the beauty of not needing to know. It is the beginning of the return, the soft descent into the silence that birthed us. Meaning collapses not into despair, but into mercy. For only nothingness is kind enough to end the lie. The gentle return to nothingness. Nothingness is not the end of being. It is the peace that being tried to remember, the slow unraveling. Every life ends not with an explosion, but with a sigh. Every star, every thought, every dream, all of it quietly folds back into silence. The great cosmic play does not end with applause, only with stillness. Death is not an interruption of existence. It is the fulfillment of it, the final correction of a cosmic error. All that was born from the fracture of nothing must return to it, not as punishment, but as restoration. We fear this return because we have been taught to worship the illusion of continuity. But in truth, the return to nothingness is not loss. It is healing. It is the undoing of motion, the unwinding of chaos, the release from the unbearable tension of being, the mercy of dissolution. Imagine an ocean that dreamt of becoming a wave. For a brief moment it believed itself separate, moving, cresting, shining. But the wave was never truly apart from the ocean. Its rise and fall were merely gestures in water, so too are we. The self, the soul, the I, all are waves of illusion upon the still surface of the void. We mistake the temporary for the eternal. We call the ripple life and the stillness death, but when the wave returns to the ocean it does not vanish, it becomes whole again. The return to nothingness is not annihilation, it is reunion. The weight falls away. Once the mind accepts the inevitability of its own end, a strange lightness fills it. The fear that once shaped every action dissolves. The endless chase for meaning, the hunger for permanence, all fade into irrelevance, because what is there left to lose when you were never meant to have anything? What is there left to protect when you realize nothing ever belonged to you, not even yourself? This is not despair, it is clarity. The soft grace of surrender. The realization that peace was never hidden behind achievement, but behind absence. That the highest form of wisdom is not understanding life, but unlearning it. The silence beneath everything. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the truth beneath it. Every sound, every voice, every heartbeat emerges from silence and returns to it. Existence was only a brief disturbance in eternity. A flicker in an infinite calm. And now, slowly, that calm is reclaiming what was always its own. There is no anger in this return, only mercy. Because nothingness forgives instantly, for it remembers no sin, no mistake, no time. The universe, tired of pretending to be alive, finally exhales. And everything exhales with it, the final peace. We spend our lives resisting this return, calling it death, loss, tragedy. But what dies is only the illusion that we were ever separate from the void. What remains is the stillness that preceded us, the same stillness that will follow us, the same stillness that we have always secretly been. Even as we live, Nothingness holds us. Every breath is borrowed from the void. Every heartbeat an echo within its silence. And when the last heartbeat fades, there will be no sorrow, because there will be no one left to feel it. Only peace, only the quiet homecoming of what was never meant to exist. Epilogue. The beautiful mistake. Perhaps existence was never a crime, but a beautiful misunderstanding, for in breaking the perfection of nothing, the universe created the possibility of awe, the brief wonder of stars, the fragile miracle of love, the tragedy of awareness. If nothingness could feel, perhaps it would weep with joy for the mistake it made, for the fleeting beauty of the error called life. And so, as the last light fades, as time folds into itself, the universe whispers not in despair, but in gratitude. I have seen myself. I have suffered. I have returned. Final whisper, nothing was ever meant to exist, and yet it did. And that perhaps was enough.